So when they ask the question, how much do you want? I wouldn't just go in with a figure. So I wouldn't just go in and say I want 100 grand. What I would do is instead I'd say, look, I've got this certification, I've got this experience in this area, I've written this paper, I've done something fantastic, whatever it is you've done. Sell yourself first, and then say, because of that, and because of the research I've done on the market, so in the workshop I cover how to research salaries, I've seen that I'm actually worth this amount, 100k. That's the advice I give. So don't just go in with a figure, go in and sell yourself first.
Welcome to CyberSecurity Heroes, an IRONSCALES podcast about you, the heroes of cybersecurity. You're about to hear and learn practical and experiential knowledge in our conversations with security leaders and practitioners and other influential InfoSec stars, so we can become more cyber resilient and safer together. CyberSecurity Heroes is brought to you by IRONSCALES, the most powerfully simple email security platform. And I'm your host, Brendan Rudd. And now, let's get into the show. Hey, Paul, welcome to the show.
Hi, Brendan. Thanks for having me on. Thanks for having me here.
Thanks for taking the time at the end of your week and your day. I'm super excited about chatting to you on the topic of recruitment and helping folks with some of the challenges they're being faced today. But before we get into the show, I'd love to, learn a little bit about you, your background, and what you're working on these days.
Yeah, sure. So, my name's Paul Charles. I work for a company called Forward Roll Recruitment. We're based in Manchester in the United Kingdom. A bit about my background. So I've done InfoSec recruitment for going on 5 years, very much embedded into the market. So I don't just cold call people like a lot of other competitors might do. I run a Discord server called the Cyber Jobs Hunting Discord server, where it does what it says on the tin. We do things like interview preparation, CV roasting. We also organize workshops. And yeah, obviously all the events and everything. I have been to the US. I have been to Black Hat USA once, hoping to come again because that was very memorable. Unfortunately, travel restrictions mean I couldn't get there this year, but hopefully next year, we'll see. And yeah, right now I sort of work on, I'm building a SOC for a company right now in terms of getting all the people in, not actually building the SOC. Got multiple roles on in the UK, and yeah, just really happy to be here and help some people out if we can.
Great. Thanks for sharing. As you know, we're doing a series on the cybersecurity skills shortage. Notice the air quotes. So we're trying to bring folks on from all sides of the equation to help educate and find solutions. But I would love to hear from you, what are some trends you're seeing post-COVID that relates to the InfoSec job market? And I'm going to quote one of your posts here just to get us started. You said here, one thing I've noticed more recently is our top UK talent is being poached by American firms offering big bucks and remote working as they struggle to find people over there with the skills they need. And you went on to say it will be interesting to see how our UK-based firms respond if this carries on. How do you retain your top people against something like this, especially if money is tight for smaller companies? So I'd love to go back to that post and get your thoughts.
It's a trend I've noticed for maybe about 6 months. I've seen some of the top, especially red teamers, pen testers, instant responders, leaving UK firms for US-based companies. Not necessarily, some of them are obviously the big ones, like CrowdStrike, for example, Mandiant, FireEye, some of the big brands out there that everyone knows, but also ones that we might not know of in the UK. They're also coming over here and bringing people over. And the only reason they would do that is because they can't find someone in America. Companies are basically people. They're all lazy by nature. If you can get someone easy in your home country, you will get them there. I think that's a given. I think everyone would agree with me there. If you can't, then you go for the next best thing. And obviously in the UK, English is our first language. A lot of good talent here. We do have some really good sort of foundations and industries that sort of spawn really good cybersecurity talent, such as GCHQ. And also, like, financial services invests a ton of money into security because they're a target. Financial services make up a fifth of UK GDP. It's a massive part of our economy. So obviously there's a lot of money going in, which generates a lot of good people. And it's just a trend I've noticed is, yeah, people are being poached. How do you stop it? You don't really, unless you can offer more, the same things that are being offered by American firms, unless you can really ramp up the salary you can afford to pay.
What other trends are you noticing, if any?
So there was one I noticed, very much pandemic related. Pre-pandemic, we were all, or most of us were in an office, or working on site, or doing something where we have to leave the house. Now that's moved the other way. Most of us are working at home. There's very, very few people have to go to site. The major impact with that change has been on junior people more than actual senior people, because often is the case, when you bring a junior person on, you want them in the office to train them because it's easier to do that. It's easier to supervise. It's easier to, if they've got a problem, they can just raise their hand and show you what the problem is. Whereas when you're at home, it's easier to get distracted by things. If they've got a problem, they might message you on Slack, but you might not see that straight away. So they're waiting for 10 minutes. And it just makes training a junior that much more harder. And I've seen a trend where, especially in the beginning, all junior roles were cancelled. So they might have had a requirement for 10 junior people to join them. They immediately cancelled all of those roles. Anyone who was looking to join was suddenly like, I've got no prospect there. I need to look for something else. And it was not just one company, it was across the board. So I saw a lot of juniors basically struggling even more than usual to break into cyber. Very, very recently, that trend is starting to reverse in the UK. So we have, in the last few months, opened up pretty much. We're almost back to normal. The only restriction really now is you have to wear a mask on public transport. So we're pretty much back to normal, which means offices can open. It means that juniors can come back in. And also over the space of that year or 18-month period, they found ways of getting around the how do we train people from home as well. They found solutions. A lot of us are now very savvy on how to use things like Zoom, which we weren't before. I probably hadn't heard of Zoom pre-2019, if I'm honest with you. So yeah, I think that the trend in terms of juniors, it's starting to come back into people are starting to hire them again, which is good to see. I just hope that continues, really.
That's really interesting. What would you say is the most important aspect when deciding on cybersecurity as a career path?
I mean, it's got to be something you live and breathe, I think. In most cases in security, it's got to be something that you're passionate about. If you're in it just for the money, you will burn out pretty quickly. That's just my opinion. Some people might think otherwise, but it's something that will lead to burnout if you're just in it for the money. So in terms of like deciding on it, what I'd recommend is look up things like, there's lots of free online camps, Hack the Box, for example, try Hack Me, something like that. Just have a go. If you're not enjoying it, it's probably not for you. And there's also blue team ones. There's blue team labs. If you don't want to be a pen tester, that's fine. There are labs for every single role pretty much out there. So just try them. If you don't like them, it's probably not a path you want to go down at the end of the day.
My feeling on this is like cyber is not necessarily everybody's passion, but you can get passionate about it once you understand it and you've dipped your toes in the water. Because it is new to some folks wanting to maybe switch careers, right? They may be mid career. And I also heard lots of statistics, at least in the US during COVID and post COVID, that a lot of folks were transitioning into cyber because there were lots of jobs opening up in cyber versus the careers they were in. They were getting furloughed or laid off. So they had to make a decision, and they weren't necessarily passionate about it because they never knew anything about it, but they need to understand or figure out, is this good for me? And I think some of those examples you gave would be a good way to understand what could fit your personality or your current skill sets. What would you say are like some of the most frequently asked questions when you get approached?
I mean, the one I get asked the most is how do I break into cyber, which is a question that is almost impossible to answer because there's no one answer to that question. I'm sure you've been asked it before. How do I break into cyber? Well, it depends entirely on where you're coming from. You know, do you have IT experience? Are you coming from university? What do you want to do in cyber? You can break in, but it's a broad subject, and you could end up doing something you're not happy in. So what do you want to do inside that? That is the question I get asked the most, and it's the question that's the hardest to answer. It's something that people have to figure out themselves half the time.
Is there any advice that you've been able to give your clients to kind of help guide them in the right direction?
So usually the advice breaks down to the questions that I said after, the first question, which is what do you want to do in terms of, what's your goal? Breaking into cyber, okay, that's what you want to do now, but what is your end goal? What you then do, this is something that it has a name, I can't remember it right now, but you break down your goal. So like, let's say 20 years time, that person wants to be a CISO. Okay, where do you want to be in 10 years time? Okay, you want to be at this level. Where do you want to be in 5? And you just break it down until you've got to, right, what do we want to do now? What are you going to do in the next hour? What are you going to do in a day's time? You break it down so that it's very much small steps, and then you've got a bigger picture of where they want to be. That's the sort of advice I'd give people is break things down and just think what they need to do to achieve that CISO goal in 20 years time. What do I need to do tomorrow, in essence? What do I need to do this afternoon even? Break it down.
Once you've broken it down and based off your countless conversations, we could break it down into entry level and for folks that are wanting to switch careers, or even folks that are maybe looking to advance their careers. But maybe let's start with entry level folks. Where do you recommend people start, and what are some of the steps you usually recommend?
I'd say it's best to start. So entry level most commonly are people going through university. So that's probably the easiest target audience, if you like. I'd say you need to start before you finish university. To be clear, bachelor's is 3 years long in most cases, I think. I'd say the first 2 years outside of university, get a job in retail. Because retail, it might sound surprising, but what people tend to miss is soft skills. And they are hugely important in security. Being able to deal with people. If you can deal with a line of people who are angry because their item isn't on sale, being with cyber is going to be a doddle for you. It's going to be really easy because you'll have all these people shouting at you. Is chaos. So if you get a job in retail, one, you get a bit of money, which doesn't hurt, and you'll get some life skills. So I think basically start before you get to this point is do that. When you start getting to the point where you're looking to get a job in cyber, maybe you're like in your last year, that's when you go for your internships in tech. And it doesn't necessarily have to be a cybersecurity one. In fact, I'd argue you're better off doing something like a sysadmin or a software developer or something in those realms where you'll get the basics, you'll get the foundations of IT nailed down. And that will actually mean that you're probably further ahead than your peers. And if you're further ahead, you'll get obviously more money faster. You'll get to where you want to be faster. You'll just accomplish everything ahead of everyone else. So that's what I'd say to uni folks.
And for folks wanting to get from, let's say, IT into cyber.
So from IT into cyber, it's a bit more of a straightforward one, I guess. You've already got work experience. What you're lacking is maybe cybersecurity knowledge. The easiest way to demonstrate that is, unfortunately, to put your hand in your pocket, get some money out and pay for a certification. There are ways around that, of course. Yeah, networking, hugely important. If you're already in IT, it's easier for you than if you're brand new, because often if you're in IT, you'll know IT managers, you'll know people who know IT managers who will be the people who hire for these sorts of roles. Excuse me. So use your network. Say I want to break into cyber. That who would give me a shot? And yeah, failing that, certifications is a good thing to fall back on.
And another post that I read recently of yours, you were talking about the lack of blue team enthusiasm. What is causing this? Is it the hyping up of pen testing and cert companies maybe hyping up certain roles more than others?
I don't think it comes from cert companies necessarily. It's definitely, pen testing is definitely viewed as being sexier than blue teaming. Everyone knows it. If you go to go back to the university thing, but if you ask a class in university who are doing cyber, what do you want to do when you finished? Most of them will say pen testing because they think it's the coolest option. They'll say, "Oh, I'll be hacking. I'll be hacking the NSA or whatever it is they've got in their heads that they will be doing." Now, often that's not actually the case. Often what you'll be doing is glorified vulnerability scanning half the time. So it's not actually that sexy. It's not actually that cool. It's pretty dull sometimes. And you'll find that on the blue team side, it's maybe a bit more exciting. But people just don't realize that it's a mindset that a lot of people have, that pen testing is the cool job and everything else is secondary to it.
Mm-hmm.
Reality is pen testing is just a subsection of blue team. They're a support function.
We talked about certs. So, what is the mindset around certs in the UK? How are they seen, and are they prerequisites, nice to haves?
So, a lot of the time they are prereqs. The UK market is dominated by a governing body, or two governing bodies. For pen testing, you have something called check. A lot of government work, or all government work for pen testing, goes via the check route. So you have to be a check greenlit company in order to do this work. And a lot of work for cyber goes via government. So you have to be check accredited. To get check accredited, you need to have a check certification. There's no way around it. And that means your people have to have these certifications. So it's a prereq for most consultancies in the UK to have one of these certifications. The other one that dominates is CREST, and that's across the piece. That's across government, financial services, everything. CREST dominates, and they dominate not just in the red team side, but also in the blue team side. Often it's a prerequisite to have the relevant CREST certification. There's loads of certifications, as you can imagine. They got one for everything. And often is the case, you have to have that particular one to do that particular job, which is annoying. I know, but that's just how it works. EC Council ones, not really useful. CEH is more laughed at than anything else over here. I know it can be useful in the States. It's not in the UK. CISSP to a degree, but only really for management jobs. So if I've seen juniors try and do the CISSP. It's there's no point. Not until you're a manager is it going to be useful.
So, what are the equivalents for the baseline security certs in the US, in the UK?
Look at pen testing, OSCP. That's still valid in the UK because you can have the CREST equivalency. So OSCP, we have something called CyberScheme CSTM, and there's another one, Tiger Scheme, QSTM. That's all for pen testing. They'd be the baseline. So there's 4. For things like if you're working in a SOC, all you really need is CompTIA Security Plus, Network Plus for SOC for Blue Team. It's a lot easier to get into SOC than it is to get into pen testing. Which, going back to the earlier point of why does everyone want to do pen testing? It's madness. It's a lot harder to get into that profession. Do SOC.
What are the kind of high in demand skill sets in the UK market at the moment?
So there's something called, well, I've mentioned check already. So as part of that scheme, there's something called a check team leader. Very, very hard to find. Very, very in demand skill. It's basically you have to have done that sort of work for a certain amount of years. You have to have the security clearance. You have to have this certification. So you can imagine it's very hard to find. It's very niche and obviously in demand. Aside from that, I'm seeing more demand for instant response and like your lead / manager of a SOC. It's like the top end of the blue team side. CISOs are in demand to a certain degree. And it's simply because companies are now realizing we have no cybersecurity. We need to bring someone in to sort it out for us. So I'm seeing more of the sort of upper management tier being sought after.
Interesting. So what advice would you give on how to best approach a recruiter and how to get the most out of talking to one?
A couple of things. So I get a lot of connection requests every day. Out of those, very few would follow up. So, I'd maybe get, let's say, for example, today, 20 connection requests. Now, I don't have time to individually go to them all and say, hi, thanks for connecting. I'd love to, but I don't have time. But if you were to say, do that yourself. So if you were to connect with me and just say, hi, I'm connecting because either you just want to network, you are looking for work, in case, great, let's have a chat. Or it will just explain why you want to connect. Often you don't even get a message of it. So I'd say start with that. Start with actually not just sending a LinkedIn connection, but actually trying to talk with them. The best thing, obviously, is to phone in and send your CV. And then we've got it. But before you do all that, I think it's vital to check who you're talking to. So I wouldn't approach a recruiter who just posts a list of jobs, reams and reams and reams and reams of jobs. Okay, they've got jobs, but are they necessarily, do they know what they're talking about? Are they just a jobs bot? Who are they? Are they human? In essence, are they necessarily going to serve your best interest? What I would do is look at the recruiter and see, are they posting content that's relevant? That's not just about jobs. That isn't just like copy pasted content as well, because you get a few that will just copy paste from left, right, and center, and just see how embedded they are into their market. If they're embedded into their market, that's someone worth trying to communicate with.
So it's like equally important to actually build a relationship with your potential recruiter, because time is money. You don't want to be wasting your time with someone who doesn't have your best interests at heart. I mean, of course, everybody wants to fill a role, but at what expense? Wasting your time, it's equally, detrimental.
And let's face it, I mean, if I have 2 people contact me in a day, it's obviously a lot more than that, but let's just say I only have 2. One of them doesn't bother talking back, he just sits there quietly. And the other one is engaging with me. He's talking, he's sending his CV. This is what I want to do. I've got all the information I need. One, I'm going to have a lot easier time finding that person someone work. And 2, when I go like the next day, I'm going to remember that person probably for the rest of the week or even the month. Like, oh, I need to get that person a job. He's a cool guy, and I know everything I need to know. Whereas the other person probably won't. I mean, I'll try and remember, maybe make some notes, but if they don't even talk back to me, I'll probably forget about them quite quickly. And the likelihood of me getting them a job is obviously gone downhill.
CyberSecurity Heroes is brought to you by IRONSCALES, an AI-powered, self-learning email security platform that helps security professionals proactively prevent, detect, and remediate phishing attacks in a matter of seconds, not hours or days. And we have an exclusive offer for our podcast listeners. Discover dormant phishing threats in your organization's mailboxes. Get a free 90-day scan back with a detailed report. Integrate in seconds with 2 clicks via API to Microsoft Office 365 and see what your current email security is missing. Go to ironscales.com/free scan to learn more.
Let's touch a little bit on like the resume and interview preparation. Do you have a framework for building out successful resumes? Can you kind of walk us through some best practices and recommendations?
As I've mentioned before, I run a Discord and we often put them through the roasting system we have on there. So I actually get peers in industry to go through CVs all the time. Typical sort of layout if you want, and this can be across, it doesn't matter if you're senior, if you're junior, if you're contracting, if you're perm. Try and keep it to a maximum of 2 pages. I know if you've been working in the industry a long time, that might be difficult because, 30 odd years of experience is hard to put on 2 pages, in which case, you can go to a few more, but the shorter the better. In a nutshell, because, if you've got 50 CVs to sift through and one of them's like 5 pages long, you're not going to read the whole thing. So keep it as short as possible. What I tend to do is have like a blurb at the top. So your name, your contact details. Some people, I know some recruiters say, put your phone number on. I mean, if you're not comfortable having your phone number on, just leave your email address. As long as there's some way of reaching you, that's all we need. But yeah, name, contact details, a blurb. And the blurb doesn't have to be long, 4 or 5 lines, just saying like, hi, my name's XYZ. This is a bit about my journey. This is where I want to go. So I'm a junior sysadmin or I'm a sysadmin. I've been doing it for 5 years. I want to be a pen tester. That's all you need to put in your blurb. And then it goes down to, so depending on if you're junior or senior, certifications and experience. So if you've got no experience in IT, put your certs first, because it's more than likely you'll have, I don't know, CompTIA, Network Plus, Security Plus. So they're going to be more relevant. If you've got IT experience, IT or cybersecurity experience, that always trumps certification. So put the experience first. So that's the only real thing I'd say in terms of seniors and juniors that changes is the order of how you put things. So your experience, and when you put your experience, I think it's good that you go into more detail with your current job. And then the other ones, you don't need as much detail, so you don't need to do reams and reams and reams, and that will help shorten the CV. But your current job is going to be the most relevant because it's what you're doing now. It's where you're going to have, if you were to join another firm, that's where you hit the ground running because you're currently doing it. You know what you're doing. Whereas something you did 5 years ago, I mean, how good are you going to be at that job now? So yeah, more detail about the current job, less about as time goes on. And yeah, I think that's all you need really. Maybe education, of course, but I mean, once you've been doing it for 20 years, no one really cares what university you went to. Or I don't think anyone does. References, I mean, we're in cyber, so references available on request is fine. I sometimes do get the references with their personal identifiable information on there. Don't do that. We're in security. We're all paranoid about our personal information, so don't give away your manager's information. And yeah, that's how I'd sort of frame it, really.
Great. And what advice can you give on the actual job search? So now we have a good resume. Where and how do we start getting out there?
Obviously, there's lots of job boards to look at. But before I do that, so I would treat your job search like you treat your job, 9 to 5. And the first thing I do when I get up in the morning is start by doing like a post on LinkedIn. Doesn't matter what it is, or commenting on someone else's post. As long as it's technical, as long as it's not getting into the realms of politics or something that could have like dividing opinions. If it's technical, no one's really going to have a divided opinion on something technical. It is what it is. So create something 10 minutes in the morning, right? What you'll see is people will start connecting with you organically. If someone comes back to your post and says, yeah, this is really good, connect with them. Hopefully they're a manager and they might have a job. So always, and that's about building your network. And if you build your network out well enough, you won't ever have to go on a job board because you will get job offers come to you. Now, obviously, that takes a lot of work. It takes a lot of time. It takes a lot of patience, but it can be done. A great example that comes to my head, I believe you know JJ Davey. Whenever he's on the job market now, he will probably get like 5 or 6 job offers. And he doesn't really have to do anything. He's not applying to these jobs; they're coming to him, and that's purely because he's got a good network. So it takes time to build up. Do that in the morning, first thing. If you still haven't got a great network, obviously go on job boards. Yeah, do the traditional thing. Apply. If you apply, see if you can find a phone number to the company. So let's say I'm applying to, I don't know, company A. Find their number and phone them and say, hi, I've applied this morning. I just wanted to let you guys know, make sure my CV doesn't get lost in your inbox, because I'm sure you've got lots of applicants. Shows you're keen. It's the modern way of, back in the day, you'd walk into the shop with your CV in your hand and say, can I have a job, please, sir? It's the modern equivalent of that, is phoning him.
Yeah, I think the biggest takeaway is networking should be like your lifelong work habit, because it's going to serve you so much in the future, not having to be like number 100 or 500, whatever, in the list of resumes. It's always much more rewarding, and you may even get those dream jobs where people are coming to you, and it obviously gives you more leverage as well when people are coming to you. So I think that's a great point.
And that's continuous networking, is never stop networking.
Yeah, and even more so important for juniors getting in to the industry. Definitely make it your number one activity and learn everything you can about LinkedIn and how to start building your network and providing value. Because it sounds easy, but there's a lot more to it, and we could probably do an entire podcast just on that.
It takes a lot of time, it takes a lot of patience, and a lot of work. But if you can if you can break it, then you'll get a lot of return. Heck of a lot of return.
So moving on now, someone has shown interest. What about preparing for the interview? Can you walk us through what you should and shouldn't do?
So, a few things. It depends obviously on the type of interview. Most interviews these days are like we're doing now, Zoom. So I'm going to use that as the current example. So let's say it's a Zoom interview. You've got figure out who you're interviewing with. So, okay, I'm interviewing with company Y, but who are the people I'm actually talking to? Who are the people behind the screen? Often you'll get their names. So say Bill and Ben are the 2 people you're interviewing with. Go on LinkedIn, go online, see if you can find something out about Bill and Ben, a talk they've done, a paper they've written, and then devise questions based on those things. So I saw you gave a talk, Bill, on SQL injections. I was curious about this part of the talk. And if you can bring that up in interview, their minds will be blown, basically. You've done your research, you showed interest, and you're also stroking their ego a little bit, which does not hurt to stroke line managers' egos in interviews. That's one thing I'd say to do. So research is key. Research, obviously, the company. See if you can find out what industries they're in, what things they do. Are they just doing this piece of work? Are they just doing ISO 27001, or actually are they doing pen testing as well? Do your research on that. When it comes to the questions, so you don't want to be like this. You don't want to be hunched down reading off a book. You want to be laid back, looking up. But body language is a lot on these Zoom calls. One way to help you with that, so you've got your questions written down, is to have sticky notes and put them around the screen. So you're constantly, obviously, you're looking to the side, but you're constantly looking up. And it will help with your voice, it will help with your body language, and it also makes it look like, yeah, I'm coming up with these questions off the top of my head. I'm a really clever person. It does not hurt you in interview. And I think finally is to check your background. Make sure there's nothing personal in your background that could be embarrassing or could be damaging to you. Like you don't want to have your national insurance number, what we call over here, your social security number, pinned on the fridge behind you. Yeah, that's just poor OPSEC, and we work in security. You shouldn't have that. So check your background.
Great. And as a recruiter, if we will shift over to advice for hiring managers, what do you wish every hiring manager knew? Because they're obviously a big part of the equation here.
Yeah, I'd say, especially at the moment, speed is crucial. So they need to, if they get a candidate they want, they should not hesitate to say, let's bring them in to interview. A good example, I've got a client who's recently said, yeah, I want this person, I want to interview them. I'm happy to do out of hours. I'm happy to stay up later to talk to them. That's the sort of attitude you want. Like they'll do anything. They will wait for them. And other times you get it where, yeah, can we interview them in 2 weeks' time? I mean, you can, but they might well have been they might be at final stage by then, or they might have even got a job. So speed is, obviously, I know you want to take your time when hiring sometimes because you want to make sure you get the right person. But if you've got multiple stages, just try and make them follow as quickly as possible. Don't hesitate too long between each interview.
Makes perfect sense. 2 weeks. What's up with that? So what are some common problems with recruiting, hiring processes, and how would you fix them?
But the main one is they don't know what they're looking for. I think part of the time, this is just my impression, but line managers will just go to HR and say, I want this person. And that's all they'll say to them. They might have a list of requirements and they'll just fling it on their desk and that's it. HR hasn't got a clue what a SOC analyst is. They haven't got a clue most of the time. So if you they will then probably go on the internet and see what it is and maybe look up other job descriptions. And there's lots of terrible ones out there, as you probably know. And just go, oh, that's the same job. I'll just copy paste that. And that's why we've got a load of job descriptions now which are just not fit for purpose because they are, well, I think everyone doesn't need me to describe them. They're just terrible. I think that's the main one. So lack of communication between the technical side and HR/internal rec is the biggest problem. And the only way to overcome that is to talk to each other and say, right, I want this profile. This is what's really important. They need to have this knowledge. This would be nice to have. If they don't have it, do not turn them away. So that often happens. They'll have the knowledge they want, but because they don't have this tiny bit, or they don't have this certification, or they don't have, I don't know, whatever it might be, they're turned away by HR. And they've lost a great person potentially. So that's what needs to happen. They need to sit down, say, I need this, and this is my requirements. This is nice to have. This would be amazing if you can find someone, but it's super rare, so don't worry, and then just focus on that.
And if we will stick on the topic of HR and interview for a few more minutes, in your opinion, experience, if you can answer, what does a good first HR interview look like with the candidate?
Usually HR interviews are soft skill sort of orientated. They can't do technical interviews because they don't know. I'd say with HR interviews, they want to be asking a few questions, but they need to give candidates time to ask questions of them. Because if you're going to work for a company, you're going to want to know, well, obviously, money. So usually HR is the one who talks about money. How much do you want? You're going to want to know all of the perks and benefits you're going to get from that company. I know in the States, for example, healthcare is a big one. Like, what's my healthcare cover? What does that look like? And it training, what sort of training am I going to get? HR should be able to answer all of these questions. And that's what a good HR interview looks like. The candidate comes away knowing what they're going to get, money-wise, perk-wise, benefits-wise. They know all that, and hopefully they're happy. And HR are just there ready to tick a box to say, yeah, this guy is within our budget. They can talk. They can communicate. That's really what they're evaluating. They can fit in as part of the team. That's it. So that's what a good HR interview looks like.
So my follow-up question would be, in your opinion, do you think salary should not be discussed before you come in? Because why waste your time coming in if you're not really understanding what's the range or, ballpark figures?
Yeah, I'm a big advocate of talk about salary as soon as possible. Ideally before. I always try and put salaries on adverts. The only times I don't is when the client says to me, please do not disclose the salary. So I always put it on my adverts. And I'm a big advocate of get out of the way as soon as possible. If you leave it till, let's say, sometimes it's like 5 stages of interviews, which is ridiculous. But let's say you've done 5 stages of interviews. That's potentially 5 hours. Got to the end and realized that they're paying you or going to offer you 20K less than what you're on or what you want. You've wasted 5 hours of your time. So get it out the way as soon as possible.
I mean, it feels to me that the modern buying experience for goods and products, it's a similar experience. People want to see your pricing without talking to a salesperson, right? So when you're looking for a job, you're kind of buying into something for a year, couple of years. So why not be transparent about your offer? And I don't know why companies hide it.
It's because it's uncomfortable for the companies to say, and also sometimes it's down to, if you've got a competitor, say you're in a city and there's 3 competitors all doing the same thing, you want to know what they're going to offer their employees because you want to potentially steal people from them, but you don't want them to know what you're paying because you don't want the same thing to happen to you. You don't want them to steal your employees by offering them more. So that's why it's usually hidden. It's all down to competition between companies and things like that.
But at the end of the day, job seekers don't care what's good for you. It's we're all what's in it for me.
That's why I'm a big, if they say, right, we're not going to display how much we're going to offer, that's okay. But you need to tell them like almost on the first, I'd say the first interview. If you're not displaying what you're paying, tell them straight away as soon as you call them. Yeah, this is what we're going to be offering, or
Even a range, it's something.
yeah, a fork or something.
Sticking again on this topic of motivation, salaries, other than compensation, what are some of the other motivators for candidates? What are they looking for?
These days, remote. Often, this is something I should bring up. Remote means you still have to be in the same country, simply because paying someone who's overseas, the tax man doesn't always like it. And that can be the tax man here in your country, or it can be the tax man over there. So often remote does come with caveats, unfortunately, for those who are looking for remote work. That's a big draw, though, not having to go into an office, not having to go to site. Another one I'd say is training. How are you going to upskill me? Are you going to pay for training courses? Am I going to get to go to conferences? That sort of thing. And mentoring as well within companies. What sort of mentoring am I going to expect when I join this firm? Is there a senior guy or girl who's going to take me under their wing and train me? That's the other one that I see. Tech is always a big draw. What tech are you using? What things are you playing with? Are you doing just, say, financial services, security around that industry? Because that will limit you to a certain type of tech. You might not get exposure to something you really want exposure to. So what tech are you using? What are you internally, and what do your clients use if you're a consultancy? They're the main draws.
You also talked about struggling to find talent and candidates. So what are some of the biggest challenges for you, in finding candidates, and how do you solve for that?
I'd say, the biggest challenge is finding the right candidate, because you can find lots of people, really. It's finding the right person to do that particular job. We do often get what I call unicorn job requirements, where they want a whole IT department in some cases, and that's where you have to go back to the client and communicate with them and say, right, it'd be lovely to have this, but reality is you're never going to find someone like this. And this is not me saying I can't find them. It's just how it is. These jobs, for example, these requirements are the exact opposite of each other, and often that's a speciality, and they're two separate jobs, they're two separate functions. Two different people would do them, and you just need to tell the clients that's what they need. So that's how I go about it, really. Half the time is just explaining why you need to separate the jobs. And often, you'll find that if you hire that unicorn, it will cost you a fortune. Whereas if you hire two separate people in two separate areas, the total cost might not be as much as you feared. It might even be less than the single person. So it's a way of saving cash as well.
What is the attitude in the UK around hiring folks with, like you say, not all the bells and whistles? They're not the unicorn. Even for those who have very minimal experience, is there an understanding or motivation to train folks? And is there continuous learning and training within organizations? Is it becoming more of a thing? I'm just curious of what's going on over there.
So the UK InfoSec market is one of those, it's really hard to get in, but once you're in, you're set. You will get continuous training. I don't know any company that doesn't offer it in some shape or form. That's a standard. Getting in, and it's all down to the requirements. And I mentioned earlier things like Crest and Check. They're set in stone requirements. They can't work around them, because if they hire you and you don't have them, they then can't use you for work. And if they can't use you for work, they're not going to hire you, because you're just not making money for them. Businesses are there to make money, unfortunately. So yeah,
even if you have certs, many companies don't look at that as experience. So there is still going to be a level of training involved. So I'm just kind of curious if the companies in the UK are, okay, you got a cert, we're willing to now invest and train you up even though you have no experience. Is that common, or it's still hard?
It used to be more common pre-pandemic, and that goes back to having an office. Obviously, we all work from home, so it is coming back. I've seen the last couple of months, several companies are bringing back their graduate programs, their trainee programs, and they're bringing in masses of people, which is great to see. So it is coming back. Pre-pandemic, it was quite common to see, even in a small company where they've maybe only 5 people, they would still have maybe a junior knocking about, maybe shadowing on some pen tests and things like that, or shadowing in the SOC. So it's coming back at the moment. It's still not as common as it was in 2019, unfortunately, but we'll get there.
Before we hit record today, we were talking about a workshop that you did around salary negotiations, and we decided we're going to do a separate episode on this, or maybe a workshop. We still need to decide. But as we wrap up here today, if there's just one tip or piece of advice that you could give folks around the salary negotiation as they're closing out their successful interview experience, what would you say?
So when they ask the question, how much do you want? I wouldn't just go in with a figure. So I wouldn't just go in and say, I want 100 grand. What I would do is instead I'd say, look, I've got this certification. I've got this experience in this area. I've written this paper. I've done something fantastic, whatever it is you've done. Sell yourself first, and then say, because of that, and because of the research I've done on the market. So in the workshop, I cover how to research salaries. I've seen that I'm actually worth this amount, 100k. that's the advice I give. So don't just go in with a figure. Go in and sell yourself first.
Well, Paul, it's been amazing listening to your advice, and I'm sure everybody will take something away here today. But before we close out, is there anything you would like to add?
I just say, if you are looking for work, join the Cyber Jobs Hunting Discord. Lots of amazing people over there. There are jobs in the USA. I know you've got quite a few American viewers. There's lots of Americans on there who would also be able to help on a more local setting. And obviously, I'm in the UK, so if you're in the UK, join us anyway. And hopefully see you there.
Great. And if people want to connect with you other than through Discord, are you active on LinkedIn, Twitter,
LinkedIn, Twitter. I was on Twitch, but I don't do so many streams anymore, but I was on Twitch. But LinkedIn, Twitter, main ones.
Okay, perfect. So we'll be sure to add those in the show notes. Again, thank you so much, Paul, for taking the time to join us on CyberSecurity Heroes today. And to the rest of you, we'll see you next time.
Thank you for having me.
That's a wrap for this episode of CyberSecurity Heroes. Practical and experiential knowledge on a day in the life of security heroes. Catch our next episode by subscribing or following through your favorite podcast platform. If you're listening on Apple Podcast, please leave a rating for the show. They really help a lot. Thank you so much for listening. Until next time.